Throughout history, humans have had to adapt to various facets of life in order to thrive. Today, we are able to access unfathomable knowledge from the palm of our hands without even thinking about it. Using our smartphones, we can instantly access all the information in the world from where we are sitting. Back then, this was very different. By examining American history, we can observe the evolution of communication mediums. Our country began with, and continued to the present day with, a postal system. Forms of social communication have continuously evolved in conjunction with this, all the way to the flashy, efficient smartphones we have today. We will begin talking about the telegraph rather than the postal system that preceded it, because the postal system was a long, continuous development, and that will be discussed later. The telegraph was developed and patented in the United States by Samuel Morse in 1837. Along with this, Morse code was created. This code assigned letters of the alphabet to a series of dots and dashes. Telegraphs used Morse code to send messages. The first long-distance telegraph was sent by Samuel Morse from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland in 1844. From then on, telegraphs took off in America, and all the major cities on the East Coast were linked by telegraphs. By 1861, the East and West Coasts were connected by telegraph. This development brought an end to mail services such as the Pony Express, which linked California to the rest of the Union. By 1866, a telegraph line had been laid across the Atlantic Ocean from the United States to Europe. The telegraph played a major role in the Civil War. Before the Civil War, telegraphs were mostly used as social communication. Government administrations and agencies still used runners to carry messages back and forth. After the Civil War broke out, the true potential of the telegraph system was fully discovered. Within months of the war breaking out, 300 miles of telegraph lines had been established by the Union. They were able to do this so quickly because the North had a much larger industrial base than the South. The War Department took over the telegraph system and was able to communicate with the front lines, helping them win many, many battles. Telegraphs eventually stopped being used because of the creation of new, better technologies such as the telephone. The use of the telegraph began to phase out during the 1900s.
In today's world, one would be hard-pressed to find anyone who has not heard or seen a radio within their life. This is not always the case. Before the 19th century, wireless radio communication was a thing of fantasy. Even after the development of the radio in the late 1800s, it took many years before radios went mainstream and became a household fixture. Prior to the 1920s, the radio was primarily used to contact ships that were out at sea. This was of great benefit to vessels in the water, particularly during emergency situations. With World War I, the importance of the radio became apparent and its usefulness increased significantly. During the war, the military used it almost exclusively, and it became an invaluable tool in sending and receiving messages to the armed forces. In the 1920s following the war, radios began to increase in popularity among civilians. In the US, it became a source of entertainment. Gathering in front of the radio as a family became a household occurrence in many homes. During World War II, the radio once again fulfilled an important role for the U.S. With the help of journalists, radio delivered news of the war to the public. It was also a rallying source, and it was used by the government to gain public attention. The way in which radio was used changed the world after World War II. While it had been a source of entertainment in the form of programs, it began to focus more on playing music of the time. Music and radio continued to rise in popularity until they became synonymous with one another. New forms of music, such as rock and roll, began to emerge. Today, it has steadily evolved with more satellite radio and internet radio stations. Radios are not only found in homes, but also are a staple in vehicles. In addition to music, radio talk shows have become a popular option for many. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell invented the first telephone. Like the radio, it quickly became an integral part of the American household. Over time, the phone became sleeker and more efficient.
Email was first developed in 1972 by Ray Tomlinson. This was not the email that we have come to know and love today, though. Emails could only be sent to other users on the same network. Additionally, email could not truly flourish until the internet services began to develop in the early 1990s. Originally, computers had to have a special connection to send emails, but Internet allowed email to finally be used by the public because computers could send information through the Internet to almost anywhere in the world. In 1996, Hotmail and other email websites developed and allowed email to be easily accessible to the public. Even with these new inventions in technology, only about 1/10 of Americans use the Internet. A large amount, but definitely not anywhere near the number of people that use it today. The growth of email was paralleled by the growth of Internet. As the amount of Internet users skyrocketed, so did the number of email users. By 2001, over 50% of Americans were using the Internet. Today, email is the most used application on the Internet, with over 600 million people having at least one email account. Now we move on to texting. The first text message was sent in 1992 and was typed on a computer. However, there was still no phones that could support SMS until 1997, when the first cell phone was made with a full keyboard that supported SMS, otherwise known as texting. In 1999, a huge jump in SMS was seen when text could finally be sent between phones on different networks. To see how fast text messaging grew, we can look at the average number of texts sent per month by the average American. In 1995, only 0.4 texts were sent per month per every American. But in 2000, the number jumped to 30 texts a month. In 2007, Americans sent and received more phone texts than they did phone calls, marking a huge landmark in the texting industry. Text messaging was a cheap and efficient alternative to calling because of the popularization of unlimited text message plans on phones. SMS is now the most used data application in the world, with 81% of phone users using it, and has been developed to receive updates, alerts, and even send and receive emails, making SMS extremely efficient and beneficial to the world today.
Starting with the earliest years of North American colonies, there were many attempts at starting a postal service. Massachusetts Bay Colony was the forerunner by setting up a location in Boston where a colonist could post a letter back home to England. There were also intercolonial postal services, such as one from Boston to New York City in 1672. A central post organization was formed when Thomas Neal received a grant from the British Crown in 1691. This was called the North American Postal Service. Before the Revolution, there was very little organized communication between the colonies. However, during the Revolutionary War, a postal system became necessary in order to circulate news, laws, political intelligence, and military orders. This led to the creation of the United States Post Office on July 26, 1775, by the Second Continental Congress. Benjamin Franklin was the first Postmaster General of this office. The official post office was created in 1792 as the U.S. Post Office Department. This empowered Congress to establish offices and post roads. During the 19th century, the postal system facilitated expansion into the West by creating an inexpensive, fast, and convenient communication system. In 1832, railroads were first instituted to help with mail service, and stamps were first issued by Congress in 1847. Also in 1847, steamships were used to transport mail. The Panama Railway was an important route until the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869. Parcel post, which is a postal service for mail that is heavier than normal letters, began between the U.S. and foreign countries in 1887. This greatly increased the volume of mail shipped nationwide and motivated the development of more efficient postal systems. In 1918, the Post Office Department took over airmail services for the U.S. Army. This was during World War I. In 1970, postal workers led a strike against the U.S. government because they were upset about wages and poor conditions. This strike led to the Postal Reorganization Act, which replaced the cabinet-level Post Office Department with the new federal agency, the United States Postal Service. The impact of the first mail service is still felt today. Our current postal system is very similarly modeled after Benjamin Franklin's and the early roots in our country's history.
In conclusion, the evolution of communication mediums was crucial in the development of a civil American society, and the ongoing development of communication technologies has in the past and will play in the future a key role in allowing the United States to thrive and progress to new heights never seen before.